Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored, and simply put, an SEC champion. He is in the building. Chris, what's going on, my man? Congratulations to you, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I will say this, my horrific takes over the summer about Alabama at least earned me about 20,000 views on YouTube because my SEC championship reaction video, Bama fans have been eating it up as I was eating crow all day Monday, man. What's going on?
Yeah, man, I tell you what, I'm still celebrating, still enjoying it. I didn't think we were going to get in the playoff either way. So beating Georgia, I thought was just going to be like the cherry on top at the end of the season. I'm not going to get into whether they should be in the playoff or not because they shouldn't. But yeah, man, that was an awesome game. It was just I was just trying my best not to get emotionally invested for the entire first half, and because I just felt like it was going to be a loss, and then. Second half rolls around, and we were up by 10 the entire game. They weren't even doing anything. They weren't executing on offense the second half. They were like, I think they had three and outs and like in a punt or in a fumble or something like that. Like, I kept waiting for the wheels to fall off, and like they've done all year, they did not fall off, and it was awesome.
Yeah, that was a classic for sure, Chris, and we'll go straight to the game. I thought Alabama's physicality, obviously, against Georgia was really impressive, limiting the Dogs to 78 yards, I think it was, rushing. Mm-hmm. I know you had to really enjoy, by the way, the commentary this week of from the Dog fans, the complaints about the referees, the injuries. I mean, it's been every excuse in the book, I would imagine.
Well, I tell you what, I wouldn't even say it's an excuse, man, because this is going to sound crazy, but if you're missing several of your top offensive weapons, fun fact, it's very difficult to win big games like that. Now, I was told personally from Georgia fans all over Twitter for 2 years that you can't make excuses like that. I won't do that to them because it's not an excuse, just what happened. So, yeah, I think honestly the biggest surprise for me was going into that game. All the things that Bama used to do and now Georgia seems to do better than anyone in the country with their physicality. They out-scheme everyone. They lean on you late in games. All those things. It seemed like Bama did those to Georgia, which I was not expecting. Like, I mean, even late in the game when they had, I think, second and goal from the one, it took them three separate runs trying to get into the end zone. Just all night. Like it seemed like that was one of those games where, Georgia wasn't playing their best, but they're going to figure it out. And at some point they're going to, tighten up. And I was just really impressed by Bama being able to, one, shut down the run with how good Kendall Milton has been playing, how good that O-line is. And then I was very confused about what Mike Bobo was doing the entire night. Like, McConkey and Bowers are clearly hurt. And if there's one thing about Georgia that they do better than anyone else in the country, it's distribute the football to their playmakers at the skill positions. Like, every game they have 8, 9, 10 dudes with at least one reception. And you've had guys had career games this year. Dylan Bell. You got Ra Thomas, you have Dom Lovett. I don't know why they kept rolling those guys out there because they were clearly not 100%.
Chris, of course, we talked last week, and I followed your timeline leading up all the way to game day, and like everybody else, like the fan in you when game day comes, right? You have that glimmer of hope, if you will, that things can go your way. And you were really level-headed last week. I think you picked Georgia to win the game. When was the moment in the game on Saturday where you felt like Bama's got this? Or I guess you said that you felt like at some point the wheels were going to come off. Was there a moment, though, where you started to grasp, Alabama's going to win this game?
So in the second half, I think Bama was up by 10 at the half. They got a drive late in the first. Because also, remember this, Georgia scored on their very first possession. I thought the script was going to have to be, all right, you got to come out on fire and do what a lot of teams have done to Georgia this year, which is score first, and then, Georgia catches their breath, they make adjustments, and everything's fine. Bama goes 3 and out, and Georgia scores just hot knife meets butter, and goes 6 plays, 75 yards. For the next 44 minutes, there were 8 drives from Georgia. They punted 5 times, kicked 2 field goals, only made one of them, had a turnover, and then nailed it to go into the half. It was that's unheard of for this Georgia offense over the past 3 years. So when they got to the second half, I kept thinking they'd make adjustments. And when Bama was up 3 with 10 minutes to go, and Georgia went on 4 plays in a minute and a half, I was like, shit. And they answered. Bama answered, and they go on a 4.5-minute drive. And I'd say the coolest part was one of the things that I'm most impressed with Kirby Smart over the past couple of years that he's been able to do with Monken especially, and then a little bit with Bobo, is he keeps part of the playbook for the whole season. So there's wrinkles on like in that playbook that they haven't showed anyone until they need it, because they don't need to. Like, that's how good they are. And that's not something Bama's done for the past couple of years, but they came out on that up, I think it was up 3 with like 2.5 minutes to go, and Georgia has all their timeouts, and Tommy Rees lines them up in 5 wide. First off, I've about lost my damn mind when they were at 5 wide. And then they run a wrinkle of a play that they haven't run all season. I was really impressed by the coaching, and then even I was very, very down on this year.
Mm-hmm. A lot of talk about Jalen Milroe, Chris, this week, and deservedly so. I mean, it's hard to believe this is a guy that got benched earlier in the season for a now lacrosse player in Tyler Buckner. But either way, that did happen. He was fantastic on Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought the athleticism of Milroe really stood out, obviously, having a player like that. What did you see? What impressed you most from his performance?
So the first, again, like early on in that game, Georgia was getting a lot of pressure. They were doing it like directly in his face. And you've seen him struggle with that at times. And they had 2 spies, which I had not seen all year on him. Thought that was really interesting. But they were only like 3 of 14 on third downs. Like it wasn't like they had some efficient game or like methodical, like drives when they needed him. And again, they were dialing up some plays that were really, really effective and kept Georgia on their heels. But there was a play, I think, in like the third or fourth quarter. I think it was the third quarter, and you're just trying to keep Georgia away from any momentum. And third down, he scrambles and then sprints up in the pocket, and there's nowhere to go. And at the last second, he just like shovel pass to I think it was Isaiah Bond, and he runs for like 11 yards and gets the first down to keep the drive going. And you could just tell from the Georgia defense that was like a little bit of a backbreaker. That's also the kind of intangibles that a lot of people, for the half the season, it was like he's a running back playing quarterback, and he's a really, really good quarterback. But that was a little bit of like, kind of like a Bryce Young moment there, just with that kind of awareness. So yeah, it was awesome, man.
And on that point, Chris, before we get off of this game and talk other things, if you will, you mentioned, and I think you brought this back up, or you like reposted it or whatever, the comment that you had in the preseason about if you're going to dance on the grave, dance lightly. So if you want to expand on that, I mean, again, you forewarned everyone. So I think it was the popular thing to do, to call for everybody wants to call it first, right? You want to be the guy that's like, I told y'all this was the end, this was the demise, this was the downfall, and you just sent a subtle warning, and what do you know?
Listen, as you guys saw with the Clemson game, I'm not always 100% accurate with like all my takes. I've had a really good year and done pretty well the last 2 years, but like I just heard about it all offseason and all last summer. And I think part of it's because you lost to like an insufferable fan base. Then you lost to an LSU team that's always like a seemingly a massive game, but Bama has owned that series over the past decade or so. And then obviously Georgia wins another national title. And it's like, I honestly, I would question myself sometimes. I was like, am I just being a homer? Like, do I just not want to admit that it's dead or that it's done or like whatever? But there were so many people that were like just going on and on. And I'm not just saying you, but it was like the 9-3 stuff, 8-4. Ty Richardson from ESPN Arkansas said 7-5. Like, but even no matter what the record was, everybody was dead set on they're going to go 10-2, and they were going to do it, by the way, without a loss to Texas. It was both coming in the SEC. And I just kept thinking of the fact that, like, dude, like that's 2 losses by 4 total points, both from the last play of the game. Going into the season, they had 5 total regular season losses by a total of 15 fucking points over the last 6 years. Like, that's insane. So to assume that Brian Kelly going to Tuscaloosa is just going to turn around in Tennessee all of a sudden, there's been nothing for a decade and a half, they're going to just beat them 2 years in a row. If you're dancing on the grave, you better fucking dance lightly, because I mean, like I hear it all the time. Damn well he hears it, and it has really, really fired him up for people like close to the program. It's been a season-long thing that I can chip on his shoulder.
So, Chris, moving into the aftermath, right? Obviously, the drama that followed with the playoff. I know you mentioned top of the show, like you still think Bama shouldn't have gotten in. I mean, your thoughts on it? I understood why the committee did it. I think really what it was, Chris, is a a flawed system got exposed, and I'm surprised it took this long. But I mean, you literally had 4 slots for 5 Power 5 conferences. Like at some point, it was going to backfire, and it's a perfect segue into next year with an expanded playoff. But somebody had to get left out, and I just don't feel the committee thought it would be a fair playoff without SEC representation. Now, Florida State fans are probably going to be mocking me about the word fair there, but I mean, your thoughts on how it all played out, because I think once you saw Texas at 3, you were like,
Yeah.
okay, Bama's in. That's it. They're definitely in.
I wasn't that confident, but looking back in hindsight, it was like that should have been like a sign to all of us. You know, Saturday night, like there were things that still needed to happen because it wasn't like Bama was 5th or 6th, right? Like they were 8th, and they had been there for 5 weeks. Like they hadn't moved. Texas was also sitting there at 7, and like one thing I really didn't understand was it seemed like each week they were very inconsistent in what their criteria was. And they kept throwing up Oregon in our face. And like Oregon's a good football team, but it was like they're winning their games by 30 and 40 points and blah, blah. It's like, and then you look at their resume and they've only played their best wins were 2 4-loss teams, and one was a backup quarterback, but they had the eye test. And then you're like, okay. And then Ohio State loses, but they only dropped to 6, still in front of Bama and Texas. And they're like, they're just setting themselves up for failure. It's like they kept thinking, yeah, we'll figure it out. It's fine. Like, we'll figure it out. Like
It'll work itself out. I think they thought it was going to work itself out.
It always does. It always does. And like, this whole musical chair situation they've set up with, like you said, the 5 Power 5 conferences and then 4 spots. What's even more fucked up about that entire thing is when they first made it, you clearly didn't even consider we're never going to put a G5 team in here. We're like, it's going to be the best 4. We'll have debates on it or whatever. But going into that Saturday night game, I thought FSU would lose. They had a 3rd-string quarterback in, and that's what I thought had to happen. And they didn't. They won. And like I just kept thinking, like, dude, they went 13-0, and I want my team to play, and I'm not going to feel guilty about cheering for Alabama. I'm happy they're in there. But when you look at like what the committee said, especially as a former athlete, you talk about like people busting their ass like all year long, 2-a-days in the off season. Sorry, Mbaloo. All like all off season, like then you get through a 13-game schedule unscathed. Like it's not like their backs were against the wall, but nobody thought they were going to get there. And what's even more fucked up is that they have 18 to 22 starters on that depth chart at the start of the season were minimum 4-year in the program guys. It was one of the most veteran teams and rosters in the entire country. And you finally get over the hump and you go 13-0. And the committee looked at him and said, hey, listen, we obviously know football a little bit better than you guys. And the 85 people on the roster, that one guy, since he's not going to be able to play, none of you are. And I just think that it's so unfair for that entire team. I don't know what kind of message that sends to the sport and like the teams and the program. You just said their whole season didn't matter. And again, I'm glad that Bama's in, but like,
it's icky, I think is a good way to put it. It's very icky the way it happened. And I mean, I'm somebody that, again, I thought they got it, quote unquote, right. Again, to say it's right, I thought they made the best of it, but it is icky for sure. It's a weird feeling. Looking at the bowl game slate, Chris, really quickly, some people out there will tell you that bowl season doesn't matter. I'm a college football junkie. I can't wait to watch basically all of these games. Maybe not Auburn, Maryland, but almost all of them.
That's going to be a good one.
For sure. No, it is. Outside of Bama, Michigan, because I want to ask you about that one in a second, which of these stand out? I mean, obviously, Georgia, Florida State. I don't know if you just saw, but the Orange Bowl presser for tomorrow got canceled. I don't know really what that means.
Oh, God.
That's the Who Wants to Be There Less Bowl, I think.
Oh, man. I hope they both boycott it.
I mean, it sounds like they might. Clemson, Kentucky, 2 teams. South Carolina played at the end of the season. Missouri, Ohio State. I'm really excited for that one. I mean, it's funny. People will tell you that bowl games don't matter, but I mean, what would a win over Ohio State mean for Mizzou as Drinkwitz continues to build that program? So just, obviously there's more, but when you saw the bowl matchups, what jumped out to you?
So that was the first one. Ole Miss Penn State is interesting. Because Penn State is a really, really good defense. Like they suck, and we all are kind of over their shit because they do the same thing every year and go 10-2. But that's a really, really good defense. they're gonna have a couple guys opt out. I think Ole Miss is gonna win that game, and I think it's also a very good spot for Kiffin to kind of show like what he can do consistently. And again, in the season with only 2 losses, Bama and Georgia, that's an incredible job by him. The one I'm most excited for is Mizzou, Ohio State. One, because Mizzou's been a great story, and Eli Drinkwitz. I don't know if you remember this. The as soon as he walked up to the podium at media days, the first thing he did was talk shit. Like the first thing he did was like talk about like the changing conference and like the scheduling and who's going to play who. He's like, I hope we get Arkansas. I hope we keep that rivalry intact. It's been very good for us. We won 6 of the last 7. He is like really, really funny. He's like a nerdy Kiffin. But he also is a competitor. And you can tell after the Tennessee game, like he does have a it's not a Napoleon complex, but he's told every day, like Mizzou doesn't belong in the SEC. This nerd is not like, not an elite coach, all these things. You get a chance to play Ohio State with a really, really good Missouri team. And like they've already lost like 8 kids in the portal, like including their starting quarterback. I think it's a really good spot for it as a program builder for Mizzou. And like you said, because like for some teams, sure, maybe it wouldn't matter. But for Mizzou, that's a big win. That's a real big win.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that. I'm sure you heard the Drinkwitz comment about Connor Stallions or whatever. Hold on, Connor Stallions is buzzing in. Yeah, it's. I know Gamecock fans they cringe when they have to admit this, but Drink is funny. I mean, I'll give it to him. He's funny. He is funny. Back to the Bama-Michigan game. Of course, again, the playoff is set. It's Bama-Michigan, and then we've got Texas and Washington. But to Bama-Michigan, I think what's so fascinating, Chris, and I posted a clip about this morning, is it's like, for the college football world, I mean, there's some folks in the SEC that are going to pull for SEC. There's some obviously fan bases that'll pull for Michigan, but it's like on one side you've got the evil empire that is Bama, and people are looking at it like they shouldn't have been in it, should have been FSU. Then the Michigan side, nobody really talked about this except a couple others out. Like, hey, they cheated, by the way. So it's like pick your poison kind of deal. Like, I think that's a fun storyline in that one. I think.
That is like, it is so bizarre to me that they were caught cheating this year. I mean, Mizzou one time turned themselves in because they had a tutor who was trying to like blackmail them for like $5,000 or something because she was going on her own and going rogue and taking the athlete's test for them without telling them and demanding money for it. They didn't know about it. They turned themselves in. They did all the right things. And they got a 1-year bowl ban. Michigan got a half-year vacation for Harbaugh, and then they became the number 1 overall seed. Like I just am still in shock that like nobody's mentioning that. I asked this last night to one of my buddies, who's actually a Mizzou guy. Like it has to be the 2 least likable teams in the country for this year, and he was pretty emphatic about the fact that he thinks that people are going to hate Michigan more, because I mean, like really, like the way they've handled the whole thing. It's super bizarre. Super bizarre. Like, I mean, like they played the victim the whole time. So
Michigan against the world, right? Jim Harbaugh saying we're America's team, like that crazy chatter.
Yeah. I cannot believe that they would like, it's one thing, we talk about this in Beamer sometimes. It's like one thing to say it in private, but it's another thing to go up in front of a podium and be like, you know what, I am going to say this. So, and they're a really good football team, but I think that in this very random, weird year, it's like all these crazy things keep happening, and one of those crazy things is apparently people are going to start pulling for Alabama in the national scene, which is not happening a lot.
So when you look at the matchup, Chris, again, we'll dive much deeper into this in the coming weeks. But I mean, what was your initial thoughts? It was interesting to see Michigan, their reaction, kind of instead of I'm sure if they'd have played FSU, I think that reaction might be different. But like, just at first glance, thoughts on the matchup on the field between Bama and Michigan.
Yeah, I think that, like really one of the reasons why you want Florida State in, if you're Georgia or Michigan, like going into the final week, because I mean, you would like to have your first step to a national title be against like a team that's not 100%. I think they kind of blew that out of proportion a little bit, but I still love seeing it. Michigan, I did like a quick deep dive just to see like some of their stats and what they do well and all this kind of stuff. Because I've watched a couple of their games, but they haven't played anybody until the last 3 weeks. So I looked at their stats and I put out a graphic about this on STS, and dude, it was terrifying. because it's like 20 different stats, and all of them they rank in like the top 4, 5, or 6 in the country nationally. And it's stuff like all things that are like, calling cards for really elite teams. Like they have the fewest penalties in America. They lead the country in turnovers. In red zone scoring percentage. They have the number one, I think, passing defense. They have the number one average margin of victory. They have the number one scoring defense. Like across the board, they don't give up big plays. They pound you with the football. They went up against Penn State, who is a good defense, like I said, and they ran the ball 31 straight times down their throat. So I think they're going to be a lot better than people think. And Bama has struggled at times against the run this year. So I think it'll be a good matchup. But every time we see a Big Ten team get to the playoff, especially when they're matched up in the postseason against the SEC, it's the same shit every year. So, I mean, I know that the past doesn't really have anything to do with this year, but how many times have we seen this movie?
And Michigan is the slight favorite in the game. Alabama, though, with time to get ready, extra time, if you will. I mean, again, like you mentioned, tread lightly. Tread lightly if you're going to tread in that one.
Love it.
Switching gears a little bit, Chris, I saw, of course, because I was tagged in the SDS video, basically the coldest takes. And it's actually inspired me. I don't know if I'll be able to do it tomorrow, maybe Friday or some point. I feel like I must go back and do what were my coldest takes of the season, because I had some really horrific ones. I mean, Bama 9-3 is the tip of the iceberg. I had Ole Miss finishing 7th in the West. I had, Missouri going 6-6. It begs the question, though, what was your coldest take? Because I don't think I saw you in that video.
Oh, this is a good one. I was not convinced that Jaden Daniels was going to be as good as he was last year. I just wasn't, because we haven't seen LSU. That's why I kept saying why I wasn't convinced they were going to win the West, because we haven't seen them stack seasons over the last 10 to 15 years, really. And Jaden Daniels is a guy that he had some really good years at Arizona State, and then he had a year where he had 10 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and he was really good in year one. I just didn't know how, if we were going to see those level of numbers, because it was 28 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. How is he going to repeat that? You know what I mean? Or how's he going to replicate that the next year? And dude ends up with 50 in less games, by the way, and puts up statistically one of the greatest seasons, really from an offensive standpoint in SEC history. For a while there, he was trending at the same pace with Joe Burrow, and he was so much fun to watch. And I was very wrong about how good he actually was, but I also was pleasantly, I was happy to be wrong, because he was probably the most fun player to watch in the entire conference.
Do you have a Heisman vote, Chris? I may have asked you this before.
No, I don't think no.
If you had one, would it be Jaden Daniels?
It would be Jaden Daniels. I will say, I think that I like the finalists. I find I'm whatever with Marvin Williams or Marvin Harrison. Whatever. I will say that what I don't like about the Heisman, this happens a lot. It happened the year that Kyler beat out Tua, which is we go from month to month where somebody is the clear-cut front runner. Saquon Barkley, 2016. Leonard Fournette in 2015, his odds were I think minus 280 or something like that going into the month of November. He wasn't even a finalist. Bo Nix was a minus 200, 2-1 odds favorite a week ago before his conference championship game. He had 308 total yards and 3 touchdowns. He is now at plus 15,000 or 1,500, and Jaden Daniels is minus 1,200. I still think that's probably accurate and correct. Jaden Daniels should win the Heisman, in my opinion. He has almost 1,000 total yards more than both the other quarterbacks. But I don't know why it moves so drastically for people and voters the final week. I just don't get that.
Jaden Daniels would also be my pick, which again, we're going to talk about that more on the show later today. Chris, appreciate you.
Quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you want to have some fun now that you have some downtime, go to sportsreference.com. And look up the Heisman Trophy, because they have the top 10 finishers for every single one that was ever given. Just go back to the 60s and 70s and 50s and look at the numbers that they were putting up. There was a finalist that had 7 touchdowns and 26 interceptions.
Was it you that posted, or what was it? Who won it back to back? Was it Archie Griffin? That he had 7 touchdowns the next year or something like that? 4 touchdowns, and he won it back to back.
Dude, in both years combined, he only had 16 total. I just anyway, it's just funny because back then, especially with like they didn't have the same kind of markets and availability to watch all these games. So it's just sports media people who always think we're right and been like, no, I tell you what, that white running back from Notre Dame is a real game breaker. Like, Jesus, dude.
Indeed. Chris, I appreciate you, man, and being gracious with your time. Last thing, the transfer portal madness that has ensued all week long, of course, has hit South Carolina. It's hit a couple other SEC teams. Kentucky just got a quarterback today. Your thoughts, though, on what's taken place this week? I mean, of course, I don't think that's something really that Bama's worrying about right now, or Georgia for that matter. But, I mean, just thoughts across college football, the biggest names you've seen, overall reactions. Because, again, it's the wild, wild west, man. And it's, I think for fans, it's made college football less likable, but for folks like us who, love the content and the storylines, like it's obviously it's kind of fun. I got to admit. So, your thoughts on what we've seen?
First off, it's so difficult. Like nobody feels sorry for college football coaches because they make millions and millions of dollars, but they've just made it so difficult on them. Like as like career wise, it's like you don't get any downtime at all. You end the season. The portal opens up on Monday. You have early signing day now in 2 weeks, and then you start spring semester. It's like I don't like that the way they've paced out the entire sporting calendar for college football. I will say there's gonna be a ton of people in the portal. I think they said the projected numbers like 22% of players overall would probably be in. I think that fans. You're right. Like there's no loyalty. People are going to be upset. And it's like, especially when there's money involved with it. What I don't like most about it is Drankowitz was talking about this like at a touchdown club meeting, which was like the moment the portal opened and they had their list of guys they want to go after, they would set up like Zoom meetings to have conversations about it. And he'd be like, they would get on and like, just, not wasting a second's time. Just like, how much? Like, how much are you going to give me? That part, good for you, secure the bag, all that kind of stuff. You're talking about quarterbacks that like they already have a higher valuation, so you can make a mill coming out of high school, then make another mill going to another school. And like honestly, Carson Beck asked for $4 million apparently yesterday. I mean, that is not life-changing money necessarily, but it's life like foundation type money. Like you are going to have a very easy start to your 20s. I'll say that.
I mean, you think about the Juice Wells situation, Chris, and I mean, it's pretty well known now that Juice Wells sat out the last 3 or 4 games of the season. Now is headed off. It seems like Texas and Tennessee are the favorites to land him. So to be fair, his dad said about 2 weeks ago on Facebook, he was replying to some hater in the comments that you watch, my son's going to tear it up in the SEC next year. But little did Gamecock fans know that it was going to be at another school.
Right.
So,
and also well before the portal was even open. So
yeah, it's situations like that. I mean, I hate it for the folks at South Carolina, the collective folks, because it's, we've talked about it a lot this week. The black eye, a situation like that puts on the NIL efforts, and people are like, well, why would I give my money if a guy's just going to up and bail? And I mean, it's somewhat of a mess, but I guess everybody's dealing with it. So, yeah, you're not demanding $4 million from SDS, or you're going to hit the portal. I think you should, honestly, man.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes for sure.
Why not?
I think we got an Amazon gift card for $100 last year, so I'm still trying to stretch that out in Biden's economy.
Yeah, it doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah,
for sure. Chris, I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. It's always a pleasure. And we'll do it again next week, man. You're the man.
Sounds good, brother. I'll talk to you then.